Um, Hebrews chapter 10, we're going to begin in verse 32 and finish the chapter. It says, "But call to remembrance the former days in which, after you were illuminated, you endured a great fight of affliction, partly whilst you were made a gazing stock, both by reproaches and afflictions, and partly whilst you became companions of them that were so used. For you had compassion on me in my bonds, and took joyfully the spoils or spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that you have in heaven a better and enduring substance. Cast not away therefore your confidence, which hath great recompense to reward. You have need, for you have need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. For a little while, and he that shall come will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith. But if any man draw back, my soul hath no pleasure in him. But we're not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul." uh, we've had a hard week. I've worked Mike hard this week. I'm a good supervisor. Um, and yet I'm sore all over. We've seen in this chapter already that we can draw near to God with full assurance of faith that what we have in Christ Jesus is secure. We can further see that that we need to we need one another. We need to gather together, and we also saw in this chapter the negative aspect of not doing those things. Believers turning away to the ways of the world. Now he says, remember what you have already, or have already been through. This latter part of the chapter is more or less a consolation and encouragement to remind us that, life is hard. And if you're a Christian, life can be even harder because we have something that the world needs, and yet they hate us for it. Jesus, in talking to his disciples, said, if the world hate you, it's no big thing. They hated me first. And so, where we begin reading, he says, "But call to remembrance the former days in which, after you were illuminated, you endured a great fight of afflictions, partly whilst you were made a gazing stock, both by reproaches and afflictions, and partly while you became companions of them that were so used." Now, he starts by telling us that they had gone through a lot. They had, they had been laughed at. They'd been made fun of. They'd been singled out, and in many cases, physical persecution and afflictions. As we get into this further, I want to talk about the fact that many Christians in the early church and on down through the ages have literally suffered death in order to stand firm for the belief in Jesus Christ. And even in this time, still 2025 for a few more hours, there are Christians who are giving their lives to stand firm in their beliefs and not waver. And so this writer is reminding them, and it's hard for me not to say Paul because I think he is the author, even though it's a different style of writing. He says, remember what you've gone through so far. You've got that all behind you. He says he's encouraging them to stand fast in the faith because of all of the things that we have. We can draw near to the throne of God because of what Jesus has done for us. And he says it's part of your affliction is stuff that's happened to you, and also part of your affliction is just simply by association or companionship with those who have been so used. There were those, I'm sure, in the Asian churches who helped support Paul, who suffered persecution just because of Paul, just because they knew him and they helped him. But in looking at this, we need to understand in these latter verses, these Hebrew believers to whom the letter was actually written were probably, in most cases, the very ones who had been dispersed from Jerusalem, the ones who had been scattered by the persecution. Acts chapter 8, verses 3 and 4, as for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house and hailing men and women, committing them to prison. Therefore, they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. They had faced many perils because of the gospel. And yet he says, we don't want to be discouraged because we have something that the world doesn't have, and we have something that is special. A lot of times when we think about prayer, to close the service, I'm going to ask somebody, will you please dismiss us in prayer? But how often when you pray, do you actually realize you're standing before the throne of God? Anyway, many of them had faced perils because of the gospel, and we just read in verse 3 of Acts chapter 8 how that Saul made havoc of the church, and well, in chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, it says, Saul, breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. When I read this, and when I read threatenings and slaughter, I read in it that he was very, very violent in his what words do I want to use? In his persecution or in his apprehension of Christians. Possibly not simply just grabbing them up and tying them up and bringing them in, but rather beating and slapping. And some of them, slaughter to me means some of them died. Then along with that, in Acts chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, we find about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James and the brother of John, with the sword. And in verses 3 and 4, it says, and because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread, and when he had apprehended them, he put them in prison and delivered them 4 quarters. When he had apprehended, further took Peter, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 sets of 4 soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people and kill him too. This, I think, is still Herod Antipas, who was Tetrarch of Galilee. But at any rate, this writer just reminds them of what they've already been through. Their present affliction was simply that they had befriended others who were of like faith and suffered persecution. And he says, well, in verse 34, he says, and you had compassion on me and my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that you have in heaven a better and enduring substance. This particular verse is one of the verses that kind of causes me to lean toward Paul being the author. I know others suffered besides Paul, but he spent much of his time in bondage, and it probably as much as anybody. If we follow him through the book of Acts, and we're doing that slowly, we find he spent probably half of his ministry locked away in prison. And when I say prison, it's not like my half-brother Drake had. I visited him one time over at Jefferson City, and he had television. He had 3 hot meals a day. He had a library that he could go and study. He had a weight room so he could go exercise. And if he did anything, if he worked in the laundry or any such thing as that, they paid him. This wasn't like that. This was it was dark, and it was damp, and usually just no light at all, because it was down underground. When we were in Israel, we saw a thing under Caiaphas' house that was either similar to or possibly the very place that they held Jesus overnight. And it was a broken cistern. And they lowered him down through a hole. You know, a cistern had a hole at top for you to lower your bucket down to get water, and oh no, it was broken, it was cracked, and so it wouldn't hold water. So it made a good prison. You're not going to climb out of it. The only way you're going to come out of it is if somebody ropes you and drags you out. And this is the kind of things that Christians were suffering. So, as the writer wrote in the verses that we looked at last week, he said, "Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water." He's reminding them of the good things that they have in spite of the persecution. And so he's reminding them, keep on keeping on. That's the best way I know to say it is just keep on keeping on. In verse 34, he reminded them that they had a better and more enduring substance in heaven. And then in verse 35, he says, "Cast not away, therefore, your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward. For you have need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. For yet a little while, and he shall come, he that shall come will come and will not tarry." The writer is saying, don't give up in the middle of the game. You know, we here in America, well, I'm not, y'all here in America, I'm not much of a sports fan. We recognize terms like "don't give up in the middle of the game." That's what he's encouraging them. Don't turn back. Don't let the persecution and don't let the harsh things that are happening to you because you're a Christian cause you to turn away. Sometimes we get to a point that we don't want to go on with anything, any given thing. You know, my wife wishes that I would get to that point about camp. I hadn't got to that point about camp yet, but sometimes it gets close. Sometimes we have jobs that are just, we don't like it. You know, it's always good to be able to like your work, enjoy your work. But we get to that point where we want to chunk it all. And that's what he's telling them. Don't give up. Don't throw away the work that you have already done. You know, Brookside has seen harsh times from time to time. Some of you don't realize it, but when I first came back, we were about to lose our building because we weren't going to be able to make the payments. If it hadn't been for St. John Bank helping us pay those bonds off, we would have lost the building. And there's been, I used to tell you that I quit every Sunday night. You know, I'd come and I'd preach and it didn't seem to just have any effect at all. And I'd say, you know, I'd be much better off just building cabinets. But the admonition is, don't give up. Don't throw away the work you've already done. I know we're not really supposed to talk about reward, but the Bible does. And the one verse I find that reminds me so much of what the writer is trying to say here is 2 John verse 8. Look to yourselves that we lose not those things which we have wrought, but that we receive a full reward. You can literally throw away things that God has in store for you because you said, I give up. Don't give up. There's great reward in simply maintaining that confidence you had from the beginning. Verse 35, cast not away therefore your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward. If I sound scatterbrained this evening, because I came in from camp knowing what I was going to preach tonight, but going back and looking over it this evening, it was just hard to sit up and go over it. Verse 36 says, you have need of patience, that after you've done the will of God, you might receive the promise. Sometimes, if things don't happen on our time schedule, we want to quit. Concerning missions, I'll throw this out there. Concerning missions, when missions weren't just taking off and flying like some, just really was dragging on. I've heard people say, I sometimes wonder if the Lord wants a church there. You know what? You can quit wondering, because the Lord wants churches everywhere. It may just be that the devil's working really hard there. Like this writer, we need to have patience. We've had some growth this year. Even without a pastor, we've had some growth. So the encouragement is, don't give up. Yet a little while, and he that shall come, and will not tarry. Jesus is coming. Just as surely as little green apples. Jesus is coming. He's coming in his own time schedule. Y'all hear me all the time saying, I'm looking for it in my lifetime. I'm looking for it in my lifetime. I don't feel bad because Paul looked for it in his lifetime. Didn't happen. May not happen in mine, but I'm looking for it. We don't know when he's coming, but he is coming. The time is set, and nothing will change it. We can't speed it up. We can't slow it down. So, brethren, stand firm. Don't quit. Move on. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13, the Apostle Paul said, watch ye, stand fast in the faith, quit ye like men, be strong. That probably don't fit as good today as it did back then. Because a lot of men today quit. Verse 38, he says, now the just shall live by faith, but if any man draw back, my soul hath no pleasure in him. But we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. This seems to speak of those who have a head knowledge and not a heart knowledge. Some of you here know what that's like, that you've had both, a head knowledge and a heart knowledge. But the writer says, we're not of them. You know, I've seen people come and go from Brookside in the time that I've been here. I can recall some in particular who Mike and I spent time with, and it was to no avail. He says, we're not of them. We're of them who believe to the saving of the soul. There comes, this comes from a childlike faith. Well, Matthew 18:3 says, verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Many times we've used the example of a child and telling them to jump and daddy will catch you. And they have no second thoughts that daddy's not going to catch them. And that's the kind of faith that he's talking about here. Something that we have absolute confidence in. And then we recognize salvation is by faith alone. Ephesians 2:8-9, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. We stopped at Dairy Queen today on the way home, and I got something down the wrong way, and it ain't I ain't got over it yet. And that's 11 o'clock. Maybe I'm too comfortable with you folks to be able to just say things that ought not. Ephesians 2:8-9 really doesn't, the King James doesn't really do it justice. Because this is not a present tense. It's a perfect tense, and it literally says, for by grace you have been saved and remain so even now. It's not of works. It is the gift of God. And then that faith or belief must be in Jesus Christ. Today, the world might be accepting of you if you'd say, well, it doesn't matter who you pray to as long as you're sincere. People who prayed to Buddha were sincerely wrong. People who pray to Allah are sincerely wrong. It must be Jesus Christ. Acts 16:31, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. So anyhow, the conclusion I want to draw is they were told to remember what they've already been through. Don't throw that away. Don't throw that away. When you're tempted to quit, just don't. Just don't. Don't lose reward that's already associated with the things that you've done. Just keep pressing on. The Lord will return in His own time to reward us for our labor. Let's stand to be dismissed.